The Porsche Sport Podcast. Porsche Mobile One Super Cup, Formula E, the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, 24-Hour Series, Porsche Carrera Cup, Endurance Motorsports, British GT, Porsche Club Great Britain, Sim Racing. For more information, visit www.porschesport.com. Porsche Sport Podcast.
Hello and welcome to a very special video and audio version of the Porsche Sport Podcast. This is the preview of Season 2 for the Porsche Club of Great Britain Sim Racing Championship. We had an incredible season in Season 1. Joining me today is, we'll start with you, the Bernie Eccleston of Porsche Club of Great Britain Sim Racing, Mark Phillips. Mark, welcome to the show. I can't believe we're here at the start of Season 2 already.
No, I can't believe that season one went as fast as it did. But thank you very much for the welcome. And I don't mind doing podcasts, but doing them as a video thing is a little bit different, isn't it? This is all Carl's fault that we're here staring at cameras instead of just talking into microphones. But anyway, thank you very much for inviting us on.
That's good. Well, I'm glad you threw him under the bus for that one, because I have to say I'm happier behind the microphone as well. Also, speaking of Carl Sharkey, joining us from what looks like his garden shed. Carl, how are you getting on today?
Yes, not bad, thank you. Good to be aboard with the Good Ship Porsche Sport Podcast.
Absolutely, your inaugural appearance on the Porsche Sport Podcast as well. Yeah, and then we also have the King Hippo himself, joined by. We not only have the King Hippo, Ryan Parkins, we also have Peter Potamus in the background. The esteemed. You've got the Borg Warner Trophy, you've got the Tourist Trophy, you've got those little silver angels that they have at the Isleman TT, and then there's the Peter Potamus of the Porsche Club of Great Britain. Ryan Parkins, King Hippo himself, fresh off a frantic night at Interlagos last night. Tell us how that went.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for doing this. It was dark last night. Yeah, the feature race was in the dark. All we could see was just two dots for headlights behind me, and just headlights in front. It was quite hard. Don't recommend it.
No, it was a challenge for our producer Hugo, who's I'll give you the polite version of his reaction after we came off air. He's like, basically, in summary, he doesn't like broadcasting races in the dark, and I don't blame him, because we were like, and 25 black cars go into turn one. Somebody's made it to turn one safely. It was if it sounded like we were blagging it, we were. We've had. We'll start with a recap of. Let's go right back to the beginning. Lime Rock Park back in April. That's not even that long ago, really. Lime Rock Park, a little 20-minute race. Carl nearly won, and then he gassed it, and Austin went past him. Tell us about how that all came together to start with.
Crikey, was that really only April that we did that? So that's like 5 months ago. We didn't know each other, us four.
Yeah, there you go.
That is incredible. Okay, the recap from it, the way this all came about, was all from a forum post that I posted on the Porsche Club GB forum back in, I think, probably only March. It was probably only a couple of weeks before that whole thing started with our first inaugural race. I think, like many of us here, I'd been following sim racing for a while anyway. I'd been watching the Porsche Esports Super Cup throughout last year as it got going. And I've been a bit of a sim racer for about 3 or 4 years. Whole of the tangential story, how that started. Long story short, I ended up getting into sim racing because I was trying to learn tracks to do track days in my own car. I just thought, this is quite a good way to go and learn the track before I go and rock up to the actual place. And it turned out. Then in late last year, I discovered iRacing, and what an amazing platform that is for sim racing. So come March time, just as the world enters lockdown, I'd made a post on the forum about esports catching on, and if anybody in the club was particularly interested in it. I mean, Porsche Club GB has, I think, 23,000 members. I thought, there has to be more than just me interested in this. I had made a post on the forum a year or so ago about esports, and it didn't really get picked up. So I thought, actually, maybe there's not much of the membership particularly interested in this. But then somebody from in the club, Mandy Sear, who runs our events and motorsport, cottoned onto the post and said, sim racing is something that we've wanted to do for a while. Maybe we should ask the rest of the membership if it's something they're interested in. And I didn't realise, because I'm not on Facebook, I didn't realise we actually have quite a big following on Facebook, and we also have quite a large following on Instagram and Twitter as well. So the club put out some tweets, Instagrams and Facebooks, and then everybody came flocking into the forum. And one of the first people who dived on that thread was a very eager Mr. Carl Sharkey, who said, yes, I'm completely up for this. And we started talking about a way to do a more immediate form of comms. And of course, as somebody who's been doing some racing for a while, I already knew about Discord and was already quite a fan of it. And I said to Carl, what about if we do a Discord? And he says, yeah. And then 2 minutes later, it's done. So the first couple of people who dived into the Discord were Carl and myself. And then we said on the forum, look, we're trying to create a digital paddock here, somewhere for us to have more immediate comms where we can talk about races and plan races and stuff, and get a little bit more immediacy than a forum. I think forums, they're still there. They still have their place. People still frequent them. Obviously, I do. A bit of a 1990s thing, really, though, aren't they? I think everybody just gravitates towards more immediate form of communications these days. So Discord, in terms of gaming, seemed to be a natural thing to use for a sim. So we set up that Discord, and then a few more people cottoned onto the Facebook posts, and all of a sudden we had about a dozen people, and we decided that we'd do our first race when we had at least 10 people, because we thought otherwise, it's going to be a little bit dull. And the first few people who came along were Austin, who came third in the champs. Danny Jones, Mr. Harry Bokar, he was one of the earliest people. Ryan Penny, he was one of the first people to dive into it, and I just don't think he'd done much sim racing before either. And then all of a sudden, somebody got in touch with the club about commentating. How did that come about, Peter?
Well, so as a few people watching know, my dream is to become a full-time pro commentator, and that's made an enormous amount of progress over the last, pretty much since that time in April. And that, I have a good friend of our family, a guy called Richard Watling, who's actually on the board of the Porsche Club Great Britain, and I think he might have been chairman at one point. I'm not sure, but he worked with Rothmans in the 1980s and was involved in the glory days of Group C, when Rothmans sponsored the Porsche factory team, and so he's got amazing links with Porsche in Germany, but also in the club here in the UK. So I approached him and asked if there's any help he could give, and he made an introduction to Mandy, and really it was Mandy was a huge part. I had a great chat on the phone with Mandy, and I said, I see that you're starting to get sim racing, and then she said, you should speak to Mark, and as they say, the rest is history. And that kind of initial race at Lime Rock Park, where I think we had maybe 12 cars, I think, from memory, something like that.
So, yeah.
With the Cayman at Lime Rock Park, and it was a brilliant race, actually. And you very very diligently went away and sat in the editing suite all weekend, I think, to make a 10-minute clip, which I did a one-shot voiceover to make it sound live. And that voiceover, that was the clip that I sent to all the channels to put my name forward as a commentator. Please don't send me a bill for that, Mark. And then and now commentate on 4 or 5 different channels, and next week finally, it would have been earlier, but finally get up to my local track to commentate trackside for the first time. So wow. But none of that would have happened without that initial shot. So I think it's everyone will have their story about what the value they've got out of it. But no matter who you speak to in the paddock, they've all got something really out of it. So it's been an amazing journey so far.
a fun fact. I think it was the day before the first race, or it might have actually been after the first race and the day before the second race. The club sent out another newsletter saying that, actually it was the day before the first race. So the club sent out a newsletter to all 23,000 members saying that our sim racing starts tomorrow, going to be live broadcasts on Sim Racers World TV on YouTube, still time to join the digital paddock. And it had been a steady sort of drip up to that point. I mean, that first race was May the 31st, wasn't it? So we'd had the test race in April and we'd had a few muckabouts. We'd had the international race versus PCA, which we can probably come back to in a bit. So it was almost, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks after those first races that the season started. That newsletter goes out and we suddenly get a massive influx. We had about 35, 40 people in the Discord in our digital paddock the day before the race. And then just before the race started, it went to almost 100. I think we had 45 new people join. Now, just as people were starting to join, by some of the questions that they asked, we could tell whether they were experienced iRacers or whether they were completely new to it. We had one person drop in, and I know, Peter, you're going to laugh at this, especially if we had Chaz here right now, he would roll his eyes. We had one person drop in who said, "How do I play this game?" and we all know what Chaz's feelings are when somebody asks that. And anyway, we had one person drop in who pinged me on Discord, a direct message, very chatty, asking about it, and I was busily trying to gauge whether they had any clue about sim racing or not. And I took a look at their iRacing profile and saw that their iRating was a rather satisfactory 3.6K. And I thought, this person will probably be all right. So I said to that chap, I says, "Yeah, you'll be all right to race tomorrow. Don't worry." And that was a Mr. Ryan Parkins, who we now know as King Hippo, winner of the season. So some of that influx made the cut. Some of them did not. We basically, at that point, we realised that we had to cut off entry because otherwise we were just going to get people diving in. And as everybody knows who's sat here, has raced on iRacing, the 911 GT3 Cup is well renowned to be one of the hardest cars to drive in iRacing. So yes, a bunch of people saying, "How do I play this game?" diving into it. It was probably not going to make the best live broadcast action. But that was a cracking start to it all. So yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and of course, so that's probably a good time to pick up. You know, the progression from that first league race at Donington, and I'll never forget the second reverse grid race at Donington. Craner curves, honestly, like a airplane crash going off. Like, it's just cars everywhere. It was absolutely extraordinary, but. That's more Donington on cold tyres. That happens to everybody. But I think that's a good time to pick up about how, obviously, the participation's been amazing from the start. But, you know, we mentioned Ryan having such a good ability on the sim, and there was quite a few others as well who were very fast. But there's obviously some who were completely new to it. But tell us a little bit about it. Maybe Ryan, come to you on this one, actually, tell us about how the community has kind of bound together and how the faster guys have helped the less experienced guys to kind of come up and everyone's kind of risen their level as the season has gone on.
Yeah, it's obviously, as Mark said, I dived in very late in the day. But then after that first race, everyone had a good idea of who was quick and who's had experience. And I think still at that point, people were still trying to find out who was who. And everyone just slowly chipping away, saying, "Oh, I know this, I can do that." And you kind of build a good profile of everybody. It's quite difficult. And I think, especially at the time of lockdown and the whole world in a mess, people wanted to talk and actually go and say who they were and what they can do, because they probably couldn't remember what they did because they haven't been done it for months on end. So I feel like everyone was like quite confident to come out and say what they did and how they can use each other's skills and stuff, especially with Matthew Dorrington. He has a simulation business. Gavin Halls, who works at the Bahrain International Circuit and previous racing driver. They just, well, we'll help you, we'll do this. But then there's other bits of when it wasn't, the small conversation I had with Mark, it wasn't purely about having, at that stage, because obviously so many people knew, it wasn't just about having like good brake pressures and steering inputs. It was more about actually setting people up on the computers and getting their field of view correct, because obviously everyone's got different size monitors and distances from the screen, and sorting out people's audio, for instance. You can hear, you turn the wind down, turn the tyres up, you can actually hear what the tyres are doing more, and like small little button changes and input things of just the computer side, the tech side, I think improved people so much more in those first half of the season, which is like half the battle, just like turning up. It's like being a mechanic, effectively, in that kind of regard. Keep the reliability high, make sure it's actually working when you turn up. It's the best it can.
Absolutely. It's funny because I've now commentated on quite a lot of different series, some, on a kind of more professional level, and some where it's very similar to PCGB, where it's a kind of group of guys getting together to have a championship. And I remember doing one, which will obviously remain nameless, that involved quite a few high-profile drivers in sim and in real life. And I was in their Discord, so you could see what all the chat was in the paddock. It's a bit like having an ear on every corner of the paddock, and the vitriol between the drivers was unbelievable. Absolutely astonishing, and that really showed in the racing, and there's people getting banned, and it really was quite ugly. And when I just thought how lucky I am to be involved with the Porsche Club Great Britain paddock, because it's a completely other thing. However, that being said, it's not as if it's a bit of a joke. The guys that are up the top are putting quite a lot of practice in. Like Carl, you made particularly you made a lot of progress throughout the season. I bet that took a few hours behind the rig throughout the season.
Yeah, it did. As Mark will tell you, I really wasn't a fan of the Cup at all. I was pushing for the RSR for the season, but Mark were pretty adamant that that's what we were going to race. So yeah, no real choice but to dive in and get to grips with it. But now I have got to grips with it. I'm still not as quick as Ryan or a lot of the other guys. It's just managed to be a little bit more consistent than some of the guys that are quicker. So, but yeah, the getting the grips of the car were a nightmare to start with, but it is rewarding. Mark were 100% right with what he said. When you do get it right, there's no feeling like it. It's absolutely, it's heaven. Really good fun.
I think you referred to it as the pig from my memory.
Yeah, exactly that.
That was one of the interesting. I was going to say, Peter, that was one of the interesting things that Carl and I talked about in the first place, was that whole, community aspect that we wanted to build. We wanted the digital paddock to be a nice place to be, and the racing to be a nice place to be. So, we set out with this etiquette and a bunch of rules to encourage good behavior, so that we don't have those situations like you were just talking about with, the vitriol between the drivers, and then it comes out on the track. We knew that we were going to have, for this first season, some people who were really, really experienced racers, and then we were going to have some people who were utter newbies to it. But if you all charge in there aggressively with red mist because you're good, then you'll scare away the newbies. And then, what's the point in that? They'll never progress to anywhere. We were all newbies at some point. As Carl openly admits, he hated the car for starters. I always knew that he would get there with it, because I'd witnessed his sim racing driving in a couple of other things we'd done, and I witnessed his consistency. And I thought that consistency, he's got some awareness about the car already. He just needs to give it a bit of time, and then he'll come good with it, as his second place in the championships has ably proved. But that sort of the patience with people's different places has born this wonderful community out of it. We've got such a great community on the Discord. The help, as Ryan says, has been fantastic. And I think, Ryan, you'll probably tell us that you found this to be actually a really good thing during lockdown, when you didn't have all the social interaction you were getting before.
Yeah, for sure. I like my industry shut down completely. Like I was working 3 months solid with a load of people, packed full of people the entire time, and all of a sudden it just stops dead, and it's just me and my girlfriend in a flat. My friends didn't want to talk because it reminded them of work. So, and then having this, it was great. I just like, even as you said, like as I joined so late, Mark linked me to the website of all the club rules and stuff, and I've dived in. And the best rule for this, which I think is key to this community, is I think one of the last lines is like, if you have a problem with somebody or a crash or an incident, or go and talk to them like you would in real life. You would go down the paddock, you'd walk to them, you'd have a chat and go, "Oh, sorry, I was thinking this happened," and so every time something happened, even the smallest thing, if I felt I cut a back marker up, or I might have bumped someone in the practice session, or I made sure at the end of everything I'd go and say, "Really sorry, hope this doesn't happen again. I saw you done a really good thing here," and just try to be really friendly and really kind. That's probably what the world needed then, and still does. It just needs a bit of kindness. And I was like, I'm just going to be kind to everybody, and just befriend them and show I'm not being an idiot, just probably a genuine mistake. And I think that really pulled everyone together. And also, I've been in other leagues before where it's just been people, dive in. You want to drive this car on these tracks? Dive in. There's a prize money of £100 or something. But then this actually could have the club involved, and to be involved in the club, you've already got to pay a subscription fee. So you've already committed to it. But you committed to it because you want the latest news and updates of Porsche. So then you've already got that connect. You've got those two things straight away. They've already departed with money. They've already talked about Porsche. And Porsche's great because they've only got three or four body types. Engine either goes to the back or the middle, and that's about it, really. And you can all discuss it, but there's still so many variants. But you're not discussing placement of, pots, and so you're actually talking about suspension and inputs and weight transfer. You're not talking about what dial you've got on your car, or what how high you run your radio and equalizer on it. You were talking about actually good things and the noises it makes. So that's why I think those things. And also the other big thing is the fixed setup as well. Everyone's running the same, which you can't do in real life. You can't have everybody running exactly the same thing in the same conditions. You can't do that.
Yeah, I think we've got a big thank you to Scott Mansell for that. Driver 61, correct me if I'm wrong, Bernie. Driver 61.
That's correct,
who
yes.
Put the setup together. And for any car, iRacing, for those that don't know, is an incredibly accurate simulator. Hence why my esteemed colleague Travis Draycott doesn't like people calling it a game. But it is. I mean, it's a simulator. It's designed to be a home simulator, a bit like how you now get a home flight simulator, if you like. So every car that's on the iRacing setup, every car will be laser scanned in every detail, and every track will be laser scanned to every detail. And in the car, anything you can change on the car in real life can be changed in the sim. However, if you look at a professional race team, they've got a team of engineers to make these cars go quickly. So the way that you set them up, if you don't set them up correctly, they can be difficult. And from what I understand, the Porsche Cup car is probably one of the most sensitive cars to getting the setup right or wrong. And my co-host on the Porsche Sport podcast, who can't be with us tonight, Kat Impey, she's driven the car in the real world and in the sim, and she actually says it's more difficult in the sim. She says normally the cars that she says the F3 car is quite similar to a real world F3 car, but she says the sim version of the 911 Cup is actually harder. So that gives you an idea just how much of a challenge it actually is. So I think the fixed setup part is a big part. And of course, Ryan, you and Gavin race for Porsche Sport in the amazing Porsche Sport Carrera Cup, which has been a joy to watch. But that's a very serious level, as we've seen, and but it takes so much time during the week to get that setup ready and stuff. But coming on to the point of the fellowship, Mark, you mentioned earlier on the International Sim Racing Challenge, where the Porsche Club of America basically invited us to have a race with them, and in order to help launch the Porsche Club Great Britain sim racing activity. And it was broadcast live on the incredibly impressive Podium Esports production, the graphics and the absolutely amazing. And with my colleagues, James Pike and Justin Prince. And Justin I've commentated quite a lot with since. Tell us about that, Mark. How that all came about.
Yeah, that was one of the early highlights of this initiative. What we set out to do. It was pretty good fun. When we first decided to try and set up club championships, Mandy had found the couple of guys within Porsche Club America who had set up their really impressive PCA Sim Racing League, and she put Jim Hemmig in touch with myself. And Jim and I started to talk about the things that they'd done and how they got their sim racing together, and they gave us a load of really good ideas and helped massively with getting, because I'd never run a league before in iRacing, so I honestly had no idea what to do for starters. So they were a real big help. So once we started to get that sort of stuff going, Jim said, well, maybe at some point or another we should look at doing a PCA versus PCGB challenge. And I said, when we've got more than Carl and myself, I think that'll be fantastic. We need a few more people really to make it good. By this point, bearing in mind that PCA were up to, I think, 250 sim racers, so they're considerably ahead of us. Even by the dozen we had, it was still behind. So we got to a point where we'd got about 20 people interested. And we said, okay, we think we can do something now. And he said, oh, let's do it. So Jim took the reins on it, organised absolutely everything. It was fantastic. And to give us some sort of a chance of being vaguely in the broadcast, because he knew that a lot of our drivers were brand new to sim racing, and they have some world class. They have some folks driving for them who have the pro iRating, so top level stuff. So he decided not to invite their top guys, and they only invited folks who had been safe racers throughout their last racing season. There were going to be 60 grid slots. I think 15 was set aside for us, 5 I think for Canada, and then the other 40 were for PCA drivers. So anyway, that got organised like that. We knew that we'd got our ragtag bunch of various skills, but then Mr. Dorrington popped up. So Matt, as we all know, is a rather good sim racer. His iRating does not actually show his level, because I think he spends a lot of time in private leagues. So he runs like a 2.6k iRating, which is pretty damn good. That's way above Carl and I, for example. Is a very, very good rating. However, when you're looking at Ryan's level approaching 4k, and then you look at the guys who race the Porsche Esports Super Cup, they're all on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10k iRatings. Matt's got this 2.6k iRating, and you think, oh yeah, he's good, but he's not that good. He's very good. So anyway, Matt's in Porsche Club, learns about the initiative, comes and joins our little ragtag bunch, and then we go and turn up for the first of the 2 races. Jim had done a brilliant job of marketing this within Porsche Club America and with Porsche Club in Europe. So there's a chap, Carsten, I think his name is, in Porsche Club DE, who knows all of the Porsche clubs globally. And Jim had got in touch with him. He'd run an article on a website to all Porsche clubs, so everybody knew about this. Everybody knew this broadcast was happening. Jim had laid it out so that we did one UK course, Silverstone, and one US course, which was Road America. We were running the RSRs, so Carl was extremely happy. So was Austin. I was very bored.
No, Austin's not. No, well, Austin's never happy. He nearly didn't go to Road America.
Oh yes, because he hates Road America, doesn't he? Yes.
No, I don't like it. I don't like Road America. No.
There's always something he's unhappy about. That's a quite good impression of him, Austin. If you're watching this and listening to it, we did not put him up to that. So anyway, there we get it all sorted out, and then the first race we had at Silverstone, Matt just storms it, and so there's Porsche Club America thinking, this is not quite such a bunch of amateurs after all, who aren't that new to the racing. And we're like, oh God, we've sent a ringer. We did quite well in that first race at Silverstone. And then the second race comes, and one of their guys who set up the PCA sim racing scene, Michael, who can remember his surname? Nobody's going to remember it. Well done, Michael. I'm very sorry for not
Corvette.
remembering your surname. Well done. So Michael, of course, is really, really, really good, and gives Matt a real challenge towards the end of that race. And if anybody hasn't watched that second race at Road America, it's some of the best racing you can watch. It is absolutely fantastic. It was nail biting. My wife was screaming at the screen at the end of it. It was so nail biting, the finale of it. I mean, put this into context. My wife doesn't care about cars at all. A whole other story around that, haven't we, Peter? Around her interest in sim racing, that maybe we can tell later on. But yeah, the human interest that's come from this whole thing has been quite fascinating. But yeah, it was amazing couple of races, thoroughly enjoyable to take part on, and it got tremendous YouTube views as well. In fact, somebody just dropped into the PCGB paddock just this last week, and I asked them if they were a PCGB member. They weren't, and I said, "Oh, how did you learn about the PCGB sim racing?" And he said, "Oh, I watched the PCGB race on YouTube last week." So people are still watching it and piling into our Discord off of the back of it.
It's amazing. And actually, at the time, it had in iRacing they have probably their most popular professional sim racing series is the Coca-Cola NASCAR series. Of course, iRacing being an American produced simulator, and the NASCAR, obviously the premier motor racing category out there in terms of popularity anyway. And the NASCAR Coca-Cola E-Series we actually exceeded the number of viewers. We had more viewers than that broadcast did in that week immediately. Yeah, wow. Straight out the gate. Yeah, so it was quite it was cool project to be involved with, and the guys at Podium I think did an amazing job. Ryan Bauer, particularly in production, they had, because it was kind of peak lockdown at that point, they had so much work on, and a very small team, and James is the lead commentator but also runs the business as well, so it's busy old time for them. So they did an amazing job. But while we're on the subject of broadcasts, of course, we started off. It was myself, Chaz, and Jack, and I have to say every Sunday we really did look forward to every broadcast every Sunday. Tell us about the broadcast from your point of view, Mark. What is the kind of importance of a broadcast for a league of this type, and also for the club as a whole? Where does obviously it costs money to do. Where does where did that come from, and what's the importance of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of the varying degrees of driver interest in whether they're broadcast or not. Interestingly, we ran a survey after season 1 to ask people, if they enjoyed the racing, what they thought of the GT3 Cup car, how they found the group and everything. But one of the questions we asked was, is the broadcast important to you? And I think the response rate was something like 70% to yes, 30% no, or ambivalent towards it. And the broadcast has actually proven to be something way above and beyond the extroverts wanting the interactive element to it. The introverts not bothering about it. It's actually become an amazing link to people finding interest in human stories. This was the interesting thing about it. As I mentioned, my wife had absolutely no interest in motorsport whatsoever. She has no interest in cars whatsoever. She knows my car's black. That's about it.
And it's got the wrong gearbox. She knows that as well.
She does now, because she's been pointed out a number of times by you, yes, that it has the wrong gearbox. But I think actually, out of the 4 of us here, I think I'm the only one with a non-manual on. Yeah, you all have manual transmissions in your cars.
Correct. Yeah.
Terrible. Yes.
Yeah. Weak lift foot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my everyday car. I needed something to sit in traffic and stuff. I know. Anyway, I digress. So my wife starts watching the sim racing because, of course, I'm taking a part in it, and she's just humouring me initially, but then actually she gets drawn into it. She gets drawn into one, and Peter, cover your ears here because it's bigging you up a little bit. She gets drawn into the way that you managed to tell a story sitting there. You've managed to get over the entertaining, informing, and educating thing that I think was it Murray Walker who coined that trifecta of what commentating is about. Yeah, so it wasn't. I think people people can mistake sim racing for just being a bunch of nerds wanting to play computer games. And from the very outset, Carl and I talked about, the etiquette and the culture that we wanted to breed into this. But part of that was all about we wanted people to realize that sim racing actually has some real links into real life. There's an awful transfer. There's an awful lot of skills that can be transferred. We're seeing more and more drivers come up these days with sim racing as their grassroots racing rather than karting, for example. So anyway, as part of the broadcast stuff, my wife started to get really interested in both the way that you managed to paint the picture of what was happening and explaining things that were dedicated to sim racing, like our fast repairs and things like that. That became a very interesting thing. And then as the story went on over a number of weeks, there was the unfolding championship. And as people moved and improved, it was brilliant to see some of the drivers learning week on week on how to drive the car and then getting faster and getting more reliable and names starting to appear more often. And then, of course, you did that wonderful initiative that I think actually was brought up by one of our drivers, Mark Bow, if I remember properly, said, discussing what people did in real life and discussing what their real life cars were. And so in between some of the slower points of action, which I don't think we had many, you were able to tell some of these real world stories as well. And my wife started to say that she really enjoyed getting to know everybody. And of course, I was spending time chatting to everybody on Discord. I think Ryan's really good at talking to people and finding out what it is they do in real life. And he's got that inquisitive nature of what people do. Carl and I used to just talk all the time as a couple of grumpy old northerners, so we were forever having conversations. so Sally started to find all these human stories behind it. So every time the broadcast came on, you told some more of these stories and then indulged us in more in people's real life. It became a window on something so much more than just sim racing. And I know for a fact that my wife wasn't the only person who got drawn into those stories. Isn't that right, Ryan?
Yep. Yeah. So this lovely lady who manages my diary for all my work as a freelancer. I was having a chat with her. She called me during lockdown and just like, how you doing? I was like, I'm doing this sim racing thing. And she was like, oh, great, sounds really interesting. Her boyfriend used to be like a go-karter. She used the timing, and then she's like, "Oh, I might watch it." And I jokingly said, "Oh, send me £5, and I'll put your name of your company on the car."
£5.
It was like, yeah, £75 you can be on the car, and then just
brilliant.
A bit of a laugh. And then I actually called my dad up and said, "Oh yeah, do you want to be on the car? How much? We need £100." So then, Kate Collier from Ari Crew, she watched the first race. I sent her the link and said, "I'll watch this," and she loved it. And after that, she made it her staple every evening to watch the replay of the broadcast. She couldn't watch it live, and then she loved it. And then she started writing about it. She sends a weekly email out to all of her people she manages, and then everyone starts saying, "Oh, where's the link? I want to watch it." It's like, and she loved it, and like it's what Mark was saying. You made it work, Peter. It was great, and Chaz and Jack just describing what's happening. Obviously, you can see I'm in my living room. There's my sofa. There's my oven. It's like it's just a different world, and it was also just explaining that I am in my living room, but the emotions of racing are actually real. I'm still getting adrenaline rushes. I'm still pumped up. I'm still swearing when it goes wrong. I'm not, I'm always happy because of this. And it's even my girlfriend and my dad, and in between the round or race 1 and race 2, my dad would call me up and go, "Right, well, make sure you do this. Right, who's that guy? Right, oh, he hit you. What are you doing?" Everyone was getting really involved, and it was lovely to after the thing, you get a load of messages from people who really enjoyed it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it shows you just what's possible with sim racing, because of course I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect this is probably what club level racing was like 20 or 30 years ago. But now motorsports has got so expensive, the technology has really obviously come on a lot, and running a car yourself, that a lot of guys would just drive to the circuit and do their club racing and drive the car home. That's not really possible anymore, and that puts a lot of barriers up for people and what have you. But I think that's what sim racing has a brilliant. It already is there as basically replacing what entry level club racing is, and I think that's a brilliant. Here in Scotland, the Scottish Motor Racing Club have already they have their Citroen C1s and Fiestas and that kind of stuff, but they now have a sim racing division as well, which they run. There's a place in Glasgow that has simulators that they all go there and race there. So that's quite cool. But no, I have to on the broadcast, I have to give big props to my colleagues Jack and Chaz. Jack has a lot of experience for his tender years in sim racing, but Chaz. Chaz not only doing the lead commentator, and I can tell you, being the lead commentator, it's quite a bit more pressure than being the colour commentator. The colour commentator, it's quite easy to make yourself sound really clever, and that was my job, whereas Chaz was kind of linking it all together. He's having to go like reading the standings out, making sure that every bit of housekeeping is done. But what a lot of people won't realise is that he's actually doing the production as well. So he's doing the cameras, he's doing the graphics, he's doing all that stuff all at once, and still having to do commentary at the same time. And I can assure you I've never tried it myself, and I've got no intention to do that. In fact, I tell a lie, I have done it once. I did it for the 12 Hours of Snetterton charity race, where I put it on TV1, most exciting, put up the graphics, left it alone. In fact, I think I might have actually got Lucy to press those buttons for me, because I just couldn't do the two things at once. But Chaz can. So when you see all those fancy graphics, they all have to come from somewhere, and Chaz is doing that in the background. Those commentating is very, very, very impressive indeed. Right, season 2. What's new for season 2 then? What can we expect? Tell us about the tracks, the cars, the drivers, all about it.
Carl?
Can you remember all the tracks, Carl?
No, I can't remember them all. No. Do you have the list?
Someone must have the list.
Do you know what? I don't know if I can. I'll have to try and find the list now as well, because I'm not sure whether I can actually remember.
Carl hasn't said anything yet.
We're starting in Barcelona.
Start Barcelona, yep.
Yep.
And then where do we go after that? It's not, because
Suzuka?
we've chosen a non-standard layout as well, haven't we? We've picked one of the layouts that's a little bit more challenging. Here you go. So right, September the 16th is Barcelona. September the 30th is Silverstone International, so that will be quite good. Little short sprinty circuit. October the 14th is Imola Grand Prix. October the 28th, Nurburgring Grand Prix Strecke. The Bez WEC layout. Yeah, I know. There we go. November the 11th is Road Atlanta full. Oh, that's going to be fun.
Oh, that's dream track.
That is going to be
dream
a lot of fun.
Track.
November the 25th, Spa Grand Prix, because we just seem to spend every time we have a fun weekend race or something, we seem to go to Spa. I don't know why. So anyway, Spa's in there.
Because you say so.
Yeah. Well, we joke. This is a sort of democracy, isn't it, Carl? We try to ask people for what they want to do.
Not really.
No, it's not. Yeah. Carl and I basically. So look, he seems like he's the silent partner here, but he and I we do lots of the back channel talking, and we just decide between us, and then he just pushes me out front to cop all the flack. That's what happens. You see, is that basically I'm just the shield at the front. Carl's just the one making the decisions behind me. It's clever. It's executive.
Now as well, it's just poking you to talk.
Yeah, exactly. So December the 9th, Suzuka Grand Prix, and then just before Christmas, for the fun of it, December the 23rd, we have Alton Park International layout.
Oof. How many people are going to be sober for that particular race?
Well, I'd have won it by then, so probably.
Fighting talk.
Fighting talk.
They call him the King Hippo. Come and take me on if you dare.
We've got quite a few new drivers join for season 2 as well. So we've got the old crowd are basically going to turn up. Yeah, there's going to be some new drivers who I think once they settle into the car, we've got a couple of iRacing veterans coming in. who one of them, Patrick Charlton, says that he's just getting to grips with the car, but I think he's got a Parkins-esque I rating, and as soon as he gets to grips with the car, I think he's going to do very well. Kat has mentioned a couple of times that she may turn up. Is she actually going to come and drive?
Believe so. Yeah, she's keeping her cards very close at the moment. She's just getting her. She's got fancy kit anyway, and she's got the forgive the pronunciation. Huskenveld, is that the Huskenveld? Is that the name?
I would say
Huskenveld.
Yeah.
It's Swedish for really fancy, expensive pedals.
They're Dutch, actually. I think, actually, aren't they? Dutch?
Oh, are they Dutch?
Yeah.
Oh, even cool. Oh, cool.
They're Dutch.
All right.
Yeah, I think they're Dutch.
Oh, they're totally Dutch. Oh, excellent. They're hydraulic. They're hydraulic, so you really got to put it. She was saying
They're not.
are they not hydraulic?
They're not.
Are they not?
No,
It depends on whether she's got the sprints or the ultimates, though.
No.
If she's got the ultimates.
She's got the ultimates, yeah.
Then they are hydraulic, yes.
They are hydraulic.
Ah,
Yeah.
there you go.
There we are.
Yeah.
You just stick to driving, King. I suppose.
Apologies.
Yeah, and
Copy that.
so she was saying that the feel, you can really push the pedal in like you would in a racing car, and the difference between that and her previous pedals are just night and day. She said, like, actually used to drive in her socks, now drives with like racing boots on, basically, because you get that proper feel. And then she's also got the direct drive wheels, so she's got all the gear. And to be honest, she's probably got the idea as well.
She has got an idea, hasn't she? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, at the same time, she said, we were chatting about this on the Porsche Sport podcast last week, and she was saying that, and she's absolutely right. The track time, no matter who you are, or how good you are, track time is everything in sim racing, because it's not like real world motorsport where testing costs a fortune. So even no matter if you've got all the money in the world, you're still very limited of the time you've got behind the wheel. But in sim racing, there is no limit. You know, for example, the championship leader in the Porsche Sport Carrera Cup right now is very high level. Alexander Teeb, who's got a world championship license, races in the Tag Heuer eSports Super Cup. And he's a physiotherapist by day, but sim racer by night. 3 hours practice a night when he gets home from, amazing. And she was saying, getting the track time is the big thing. We've seen that. If you've got somebody like Daniel Abt, who's was a top level professional racing driver, driving a factory driver for Audi, and he's getting, professional sim racers to come in, that gives you an idea that there's no automatic entry. It's a little bit like, you could probably say a little bit like somebody like Valentino Rossi, 9 times world champion in motorcycling. It's a bit when he goes to do the odd rally from time to time or the odd GT race. The skills are transferable, but there is a preparation to put in. So I've no doubt Kat will be fast, but as she said, it's going to take the track time for anyone wanting to compete in it for sure. Car wise, we're still on the Cup car, are we?
We are indeed, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We as part of the post season 1 questionnaire, we did ask about the car. We did not ask if people wanted to run it for the future one. We decided we were sticking with it. And I tell you what, here's why. So people are dying to get into the RSR and go and race the RSR. But here's the thing. We wanted to build this thing. We wanted to build this thing from the start as an ability to link into the real world. An example of that happening just last week, one of the drivers did the Driver 61 Sim Racing Masterclass, actually. So Scott Mansell's actually really reached into the sim racing thing with his Driver 61 training. He's done real world driver training for something like the last 15 years. And of course, the skills directly translate into the sim, and vice versa. So he set up this whole sim racing training thing, and one of our championship drivers, Chris Bowie, actually went and did the 4-week course. And he came back from doing that sim racing training course, and then he did a track day in his car. And he said that the sim racing course he'd done not only had improved his ability in sim racing and his confidence, it had also improved his ability and confidence on the track in his real car. So he was getting real benefits from it. So here we have this amazing loop of Scott Mansell taking his real world to train sim racing drivers, and then the sim racing training people are doing is actually applying to the real world. So this is the thing, is that they do directly translate. Now, because of that, Porsche's motorsport pyramid, as you know, you've got the GT4 Club Sports that people can start in as a sort of beginner class because they're a bit easier car to drive. And then you go up to the 911 Cup cars, and then you get the GT3R, and then the proper RSRs. And that sort of pyramid, you go from having little to no aero to having full aero, and as most proper drivers will tell you, the aero is actually fantastic for going really fast, but it can also mask an awful lot of basics that you need to learn in terms of physics of what tyres are doing. So as part of this sort of club level racing scene, one of the things I didn't want us to do was go and dive straight into an aero car that would hide some really good learnings. There are some fundamental learnings you can get about racing cars in the GT3 Cups, moving weight around and appreciating what tyres do. So we really wanted to stick with it for season 2, just because of the value that you get from driving that car. And, as Carl said, he hated the thing for starters, and then he goes and comes second in the championship. Incidentally, the other person who was most vocal about hating that car was Austin, who came third in the championships. So, so we're sticking with the car for season 2. Yes, we're moving to fortnightly from a weekly broadcast and a weekly race schedule, just because people have had to, fit in their lives now. We're moving from Sundays to Wednesdays. So it's going to be a Wednesday night live broadcast now. If I remember rightly, live broadcast will start at 7:45 p.m. and I think the races will start about 8. So the live broadcast will catch the last part of qualifying. And I believe it's you, Peter, and Chaz as the dream team this time.
So I understand, And the race format the same with the reverse grid, 2 20-minute races. Is that still the plan?
Yeah, we're going to stick with that.
Good. I think that's a good call.
We talked about having a GT4 class if we had a lot of newbies coming into it. We talked about not doing the reverse grid. But I think the entertainment factor of it was fantastic. And, for some of the drivers who don't often qualify near the front of the grid, having the reverse grid gives them a chance to enjoy, the bit of appearing on the broadcast. All these people that we've talked about enjoy watching it, the families and friends and everything. We all like to be, appearing on the broadcast at some of them. It's quite nice thing. So some of those guys get to start on the front, and it then adds a challenge as well to the fast guys like Ryan and Ryan and Carl, who might be qualifying up there. It's all very well winning races, but just driving off from the front and then going round and round in circles for 20 minutes can get a bit dull, can't it? So having the challenge of cutting through some traffic is yet another skill to learn and makes it quite good fun. So, yeah, sticking with that.
I prefer race 2.
Do you?
I prefer to start the back. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, because of where I tend to be, caravanning, as my friend Adam should call it. It does get quite mundane. When you're just driving sort of 3-4 seconds behind the lead pack and you're not close enough to stay in touch, it does get really boring. That's why I prefer race 2. It's much more fun racing from the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you find, Carl, as well, when we went to Donington for the track day a couple of weeks ago, and we all sort of met up there at Donington? Did you find that driving around Donington in your own car, did it just all look familiar because of all the laps we'd put in there for the sim racing champs?
Yeah, not only that, it were a little bit too much like the sim, because I was using my braking points from the sim and had a couple of hairy moments. But it was really good to know exactly where you had to put the car, exactly where you were going, even as much as coming down Craner curves, just letting off a little bit like I do in the sim, just to turn the car in before you go around the left and then go back up the hill. So even doing things like that, it were great. Fantastic.
It's one of the things that Mandy and I had a conversation very, very early on was we thought this would be really cool for the club eventually to have the sim racing as a similar grassroots initiative to karting. It'd be great to get some kids involved in racing and let them learn how to race without having a gigantic expense as well. So it'd be nice. It'd be nice for somebody to dive into the paddock at some point and say, can my 10-year-old come racing? Yes, please do. Yeah, fantastic.
Well, the great thing with doing that is it's obviously like you're sitting still. You're not actually moving. Your bum's not moving. For reference points, you're actually paying more attention to the reference of what you're looking at and hearing. But then also on top of that is that once you improve, I know I've done it a lot in season 1. I was looking at the data every session. I'd spend at least 5 to 10 minutes looking through the data to see exactly where I was going right with the squiggly lines. I learned so much in that. I learned the perfect shift point, how much to brake, threshold braking. Every track I just learned incrementally, even more than I thought I knew. I thought I knew it already, but then I just learned exactly when I went, the right revs, the right spot to hit the brakes, where to change the brake bias. If you can read that type of data and understand that and change to it and adapt to it, you then jump into a go-kart, do a few laps. Your skills will be quite high already if you're driving quite well. You can come in, look at your data on your box and be like, oh, great, well, I can go faster there, and there. I'm slow here. And then you can instantly improve corner by corner. It's so, like, people say that's not relative to the real world because the tyres or the modelling's wrong. Nah. This is very direct in many other ways, not obviously direct as in the suspension, the damper of the McLaren's not whatever. It's more about having the adaptability and the reference for it.
It's relatable. Absolutely
how
relatable.
The race done last night, what Peter mentioned, isn't it? And the race last night, it started off at sunset. Great. I'm in VR, so I've got the headset and you're moving around and see where you're going. But as soon as I start to oversteer, you can hear it and you can see it, and the wheel goes a little bit light, and then you can correct it. When it was dark, there was no world reference. There was nothing to compare anything to. I was literally watching the rear lights of the other car, and if they were moving in the wrong direction, I was oversteering coming out of a corner. I couldn't tell anything because I had no visual reference to what was changing. I'm sure it's exactly the same in the real world. You're going around Le Mans, how are you going to know? Well, if you're understeering, you can only feel that. But at the same time, you have no reference whatsoever. It's brilliant.
I think that's a difference between a fast driver and a really fast driver. What you were saying there, though, Ryan, to be able to read your own data and correct and do that amount of laps that you were putting in for last season. That's what makes you faster than anybody else. I didn't get the time to do that, and it shows. That's why you're on average about a second and a half a lap faster than I am.
Otherwise, you'd be right there, Carl.
It definitely all adds up. Yeah.
That's why they call him.
That's why
they call him the King Hippo. Well, I have to say, I know you guys will agree. I cannot wait for the season to get going. Less than 10 days to go. It's a week on Wednesday. It'll be. Is that right?
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah. So. Getting the best, get practicing and learning my fun facts about Barcelona Catalunya circuit. I've been there in the real world. I went to MotoGP there a couple of years ago, so no excuses at all. And I broadcast live on Sim Racers World with myself and Chaz Draco on commentary, so that's going to be really fun indeed. And I tell you what, it's been a great to have a chat with you guys as always. I can't believe I've got through this without swearing like I normally do or when we're having our fun races. But it's been a great to have a chat here on the Porsche Sport Podcast, the first video version of Porsche Sport Podcast as well. And looking forward to seeing you guys out on track.
The Porsche Sport Podcast. For more information, visit www.porschesport.com.